Hello and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to James Vigor for sending in some awesome pictures of his Imperial Guard Pure Infantry Army. I love a good Pure Infantry Army and I really enjoy seeing one beautifully laid out on the tabletop. So thank you for sending these pictures. Really like the silver and red colour scheme. I once dabbled with the idea of doing a silver and red colour scheme. Not in this Mordian restoration, but the one before, when I took my terribly painted childhood models and tried to give them, which were all mixed with eBay things, I tried to give them a consistent colour scheme. I almost went with red and silver. I ended up going with red and tan, but then obviously now I've redone them under green and blue, so totally different. But I am partial to a good sort of red and silver colour scheme. Reminds me of some sort of Roman legionnaires. Sadly, James reported that his forces got absolutely battered on the tabletop, but at least they looked good doing it, and that's the important thing. This isn't flying; it's falling with style. Now, thank you for sending these pictures in. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. But without further ado, let's get into today's video. Now today, guys, I want to talk about rules bloat and the number of supplements that we see flying around at the moment. And for many armies, it has become a little bit ridiculous, the number of books that they need to be lugging around. And I want to talk about just generally the frustrations that I have around this. And I'm sure that many of the other players that are listening to this video will have this as well. But also sort of regale you or just talk about, how this isn't the first time we've been here and how it's kind of a bit of a problem that I think is endemic to 40k and will always be there unless it's a serious overhaul of the way Games Workshop redo the rules, or release the rules I should say. Now, to be very clear, what are we talking about with rules bloat? Very quick groundwork. We're talking about the fact that you can't just turn up to a game. Realistically, especially a competitive game, remember this channel has always got a bit of that competitive slant to it, you can't really turn up to a competitive game with just your rule book and your codex. You can't do that because you won't have everything you need to even engage in a competitive game. Now, when you actually think about it, you can't, some people say, oh, of course you can just turn it with the rule book and your codex. It's like, yeah, if you're playing open play or narrative play, that's fine. But if you're playing competitive play, you can't do that. Because the first thing you want to remember is that the main rules are no longer in the competitive play handbook, whatever it's called, match play 2022, whatever it is, NACMUND. So they're no longer in there. They used to be in the little competitive play booklet, but they're no longer, which means if you're going to turn up to a game of 40k, then at a minimum, you need the rule book, the NACMUND book, and you need your codex. But realistically, you're going to need more than that. Because especially if you're running an army like Imperial Guard, and this channel is a guard focused channel, so let's use ourselves as an example. You need your rule book, you need your codex, you need your NACMUND supplement, you may need the Minotaur and Field Manual, maybe not. You're going to need something where you get your additional points from, You're going to need Psychic Awakening, because half your stratagems are in there. And if you're using Scions, that's basically your codex as well. You're going to need if you're using Cadian, and again, if from a competitive point of view, you probably want to be using Cadian, so you're going to be using your Rising Tide. Warzone Octaris Rising Tide. Then you need your FAQ. Then you need your balance patch. And then there's probably something else. Oh, and then you need the PDF they released recently about the content validity update. So you need to be able to have that as well. So when you add all that up, I've got my fingers out here in front of me now. That looks like 9 pieces of paper you've got to have on you. Bear in mind, if you're going to a tournament, you'll need copies of your list as well. So if you go through that, you've got rulebook, NACMUND, codex, Minotaur and Field Manual, or somewhere where you can get your latest points update. You need your Psychic Awakening, you need your Warzone Octarius, you need your FAQ, and you need your the other couple of bits that I mentioned as well. So that's like, you're looking at like 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 pieces of paper that you need to have on you to turn up to a game. And when you describe it like that, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And there's like no way that you should need that many things to run any army in 40k, any army competitively. And so it is a real problem, and this is not the first time we've had it. So like I mentioned, let's have a little trip down memory lane, a little trip down the history books. This is a thing that we've seen as a big issue in 6th edition, 7th and 7th edition, and it was something that almost led to the end of 40k. 7th edition almost killed 40k. In my mind, as someone who's been around the block a bit with this hobby, there's no doubt in my mind that 7th edition almost killed 40k. The number of people that I know that left and came back in 8th edition, and there's a reason 8th edition was such a hard reset. Because bear in mind, they'd done a hard reset for Warhammer Fantasy with Age of Sigmar, and it had helped a bit. But Age of Sigmar has only just really lost a bit of its, it lost the majority of its sort of bad reputation. It had a lot of people poo-pooed it for a very, very long time. There were videos of people burning their Warhammer Fantasy armies. It was a bit of a joke, but burning the Warhammer Fantasy armies because they didn't want Age of Sigmar at all. And that's because people liked Warhammer Fantasy and they didn't really want this whole new system. But with 8th edition, the 7th edition was so broken that when Games Workshop announced 8th edition was going to be such a hard reset, people rejoiced. And didn't put people off the game system, it brought people into the game system. That shows you how buggered 7th edition was, because you had this situation again where you had to turn up with so many books. And one of the huge selling points of 8th edition, if you go back and if you can find the old Warhammer community articles, Games Workshop said like, no longer do you need to lug around loads of books. Every army is going to have like an index, and all the index, multiple armies are going to be held in a single index. So if you're an Imperial player, you might only need to buy one index book, and it will cover every army you've got. You might be in that situation. If you're a Marine player, one of the indexes is going to cover every Marine book that you've got, every Marine sort of faction you've got. And so it was really, really good. And they were like, all you're going to need is your rule book, your 8th edition rule book, and your index. That's all you need to get into 40k. And for a time, it was really, really good. And that literally brought so many people back into the hobby. So many people. And then as the codexes were released, people were okay with that. Because for the longest time, for the beginning of 8th edition, for the first year and a half, 2 years, all people needed was their rule book and their codex. There were no supplements. There was no Space Marine supplements. There was no Vigilus. There was nothing like that. There was no Psychic Awakening. It was just your codex and your rulebook. And that was what saved. That was one of the major things that saved 40k, because they reined in all the power creep and they simplified the game down to its basic elements. The problem you've got now with all this the rules bloat is a symptom of something else. A lot of people will say it's a symptom of shady business practices and all that kind of stuff. Maybe, but I'm no businessman. I don't know if that's the case. But what I find the rules bloat is, and this endless, especially when you've got an older faction like Guard, and there's endless sticking plasters that get applied to your faction, is it's because of it's a symptom of power creep. So not only, because if you look at Tyranids, for example, they can turn up and all they really need is the rulebook, Nachman, and the codex. 3 books, that's not the end of the world, right? That's all they really need. But other older factions have had, Guard, have had so many sticking plasters applied to them because they need it in order to stay even remotely competitive. Can you imagine taking your Guard codex, just your Guard codex, with no Psychic Awakening supplements, no Rising Tide supplements, no Scion traits, nothing? If the only thing you had access to was your codex. Can you imagine trying to win a game of 8th edition with that? No custom regiment traits, nothing. No extra Cadian. You go back to the old argument of Cadian versus Catachan. You don't want no extra Cadian stuff either. Nothing. No data shit. No data slate. No balance patch. Nothing. No Russell's a 2-up save. No proccing orders. Nothing like that. You boil it down to your base thing. You wouldn't have a chance. You wouldn't have a chance, even against some of the other lower tier factions. You'd be straight in the bin. It would be almost unplayable. And so that's why Guard have got so many things, because as we've seen the relentless march of 9th edition, where with like just things like Dark Elder breaking the game, Custodes, and then Harlequins and regular Craft World, and now Tyranids are just going to be unbelievably powerful. And the fact that, you know, they are taking things away from certain factions, but adding more and more buffs and things to Guard. The reason why we're suffering off this rules bloat and faction bloat is because we've been around for so long, and they've had to keep applying all these sticking plasters to us. So it's a symptom of it, and I guess that's this is one of the main frustrations with the game. Now, the thing is this is always going to be like this. Why does this keep happening? Why does because Games Workshop had to do a hard reset for 3rd edition. They had to do a hard reset for 8th edition. People are now saying that they are going to have to do a hard reset for 10th. The game is so busted that people are saying that you need to do a hard reset for 10th. You are getting, it's interesting. People are saying, just to be a bit, I'm always trying to be fair and balanced on this. It's interesting, the meta is starting to look, the top meta is starting to look quite varied, because we've now got about 6 or 7 factions, or 5 or 6 factions, which are broken, are really, really powerful. And when these 5 or 6 factions play against each other, they have a great time, and it's relatively fair. And then you've got the other 10 factions, if not more. If you include things like Inquisition and stuff like that. You've got all these other factions, at least 10, 15. I think it's like, someone says like 20 plus factions for 40k at this point, if you include all the little ones. I mean, not quite as little as like Galapox and stuff like that, but down to the level of sort of Inquisition, those armies which have always had like a staple force. And especially if you split out all the Marines into their distinct factions. You've got like 20 plus factions in this game. You've got like 5 which are okay and 15 which are just not doing okay. Now, why does this keep happening? And it's because, and I personally think it is because Games Workshop are just keep doing this cycle of releasing rules a bit at a time, releasing things a bit at a time. Even a codex a month. Games Workshop has basically been pumping out a codex a month since the start of 9th edition, and 18 months on, we've still not had all the factions. So that gives you an idea. So that's even because they've constantly released more and more stuff for the game. Even when they're releasing at such a rapid rate, and people say the release rate is slow, the release rate is not slow. The release rate is the fastest it has ever been. It has ever been. You used to get a codex, and that was you. Like how Guard has not had a codex since like beginning of 8th edition. That used to be the case for everyone. Like, you'd get 1 or 2 new codexes a year. Now we get a new codex every month, right? So, and that's why it took them from 3rd to 7th to break it, but it's only taken them 8th and 9th because the release has been that such breakneck speed. Now, because they are releasing these things one at a time, inevitably you get power creep. Inevitably it happens. I mean, it's just... I don't know the science why it keeps happening, but we keep seeing it happening. So people talk about having this push for digital rules and how Games Workshop should, at the beginning of 10th, release everything full digital rules. Just get rid of codex and all that kind of stuff. And if you want to print, still, you can charge people for them if you want. I don't care if you charge people for digital rules or not. But the point is that everyone gets everything released at the same time. And then all they do is they don't release, all the codex is released at the beginning of an edition, and then then you do little monthly tweaks, okay? Because Games Workshop and we're going into a bit of a tangent here, but it's all going to come back round. It's like, and how do we fix this supplement block? How do we fix this power creep? The problem is that you need to release everything. Like, you need to release everything at once because it puts everyone at the same starting position, and then you can tweak things as it goes along. That's the way you need to do it. But going to digital rules only solves half of the problem. Because as much as Games Workshop wants to push 40k in the direction of being like an esports kind of thing, or T-sports, tabletop sports, as much as they want to push it in that direction, it will never get there under the current format. And it'll never get there even with digital rules, because at the end of the day, we have to build and paint these models. Okay, and it's not like an update to a video game where you make the update and the change is instantaneous. Even with some of the players that are the most on this, are the most keyed into 40k, when a shift happens, it will take them a week, 2 weeks to either borrow or build and quickly paint the next army. If it's a significant enough change, you're going to see a month to 6 week turnaround as they actually have to go out, get the models, buy them, build them, put them together, and actually get them onto tabletop and get to the next event. Because it's not like again with a video game where you can make the tweak instantly and the next day people are playing competitively ranked matches against each other online. It's not like that in 40k. Even if you release an update, it could take people, like, let's say a month realistically for the meta to wholly shift. Some people might get there a bit early, but let's say it takes about a month wholly for the meta to shift. And then you have to have an event that picks, there are events every weekend these days, but to have like major or super majors that really show the state of the meta, you're going to have to wait a month or so for that to happen. So even if Games Workshop makes these tweaks, there's always going to be this lag, and there's always going to be this sort of delay when people actually get around doing it. And for the regular players out there, the majority, even those people that don't play competitive that much, competitive leads. It's the reality of the situation that the competitive scene leads the rest of the scene. Because if the narrative scene led the rest of the scene, we'd be seeing a lot more narrative books. But all the narrative books have dried up, haven't they? All the Crusade books have dried up because no one bought them, because the competitive scene drives the rest of it. What's the most common type of battle report you see out there? It's your match play ones. People have been pushing and pushing and pushing narrative. Things like Winter SEO and other ones have been pushing narrative battles for ages, but they just don't get as much viewership especially on YouTube, as when you see a good old match play game. That's my perspective. I could be biased, but that's my interpretation. That's what I've seen. So you can't just keep making these changes, because for the vast majority of people, it's going to take them longer than a month. It's going to take them 3 months, 6 months to get the models together, to build them, paint them, especially if someone gets into a new army. For an example of this is, my brother has had Blood Angels forever, and he's had his Dark Eld, but he recently got into his Dark Eld, and he said, you know what, I'm just going to get a Dark Eld army. They're broken, and I want a competitive army. So I'm just going to spend, half a year just putting together a really hardcore Dark Elder army. By the time he'd finished his Dark Elder army and taken it to the first tournament, it wasn't competitive anymore. And he literally bought and built the army for it to be competitive. Within 6 months, his whole plan, his whole investment was basically wasted. And he went to a couple of tournaments with me to it, and then he stopped going. And that's why he plays bot action and Malifaux and stuff now, and he doesn't play 40k as much. And that is a situation from a veteran player. Now you can imagine that with a newer player who has specifically got into this game for the competitive side of it, which I know a lot of people which do that. Some people naturally evolve to the competitive. A lot of people start at the competitive end because that's what Games Workshop have been pushing. And it's like, you can't have that situation where people are having to literally buy and sell armies, or just like by the time they've got one up and running, it's not what it was, and all this kind of stuff. You can't have that and not cause this bad taste, because you're not only changing the game constantly, people are having to buy new rules constantly, people are having to buy models constantly. This is what causes people to get fed up with 40k. This is what causes people to say the meta's broken. This is what causes people to say, fuck it, I'm just leaving. This is what causes it. The endless rules bloat is a symptom of the endless power creep, which is a symptom of the game breaking, which is a symptom of the competitive scene leading the way. Okay, you see how these things all stack up. They're not separate topics. A lot of people will talk to you about these things as separate topics. They're not. They're all interconnected. Now, I said, how do you fix that? How do you fix it? Okay, well, Games Workshop have kind of, in a funny sort of way, the answer is right there in front of them. And for many people, the answer is they already know the answer. But what you need to do is, you need to be able to if you're going to release digital rules, great. If you're going to be causing people to tweak their armies constantly, great. But you need to allow the models to be flexible as well. And so Games Workshop have already done this in a lot of cases. but you need to provide all of the weapon. When I buy an infantry box, I need to have all the weapon options. Well, I've got that now with my Cadians, haven't I? You know, when you look at any of the newer kits, they've got more bits that you can shake a stick at, and Games Workshop charge you for those bits. Even if you can't use them all, they charge you for those bits. Now, the problem is that if you glue your models together, you can't use all those bits, so you end up wasting them. So either what happens is you end up having to go and buy more, so you've got more options, or you have to magnetize. But the funny thing is magnetization isn't as convenient as everyone says it is. Whenever I magnetize a model, it literally doubles the amount of time, if not triples the amount of time it takes for me to put that thing together. Not even paint the bits, put it together. Games Workshop need to have modular models, and they've already got the technology. And I learned this about this new technology they've got when I put together my Black Templars, because they're all easy build intercessors, and the easy build intercessors, they don't need a drop of glue if you don't want them to. You can put the whole model together without glue, because it all slots together nice and tight, and the arms go on with these two little, for lack of a things, these stalks that come out. Now you can imagine if every model was like that. So when you bought your Guardsman box, and it was like, oh, okay, I don't need to magnetize everything. The arms have got the little stalks on. The torso's got the little stalks on. Oh, okay, plasma guns are the thing that I'm in at the moment. Right, I'll paint every bit in the box up, and I'll put the plasma guns on. Oh, Games Workshop have balanced the game. They've done a little tweak. It looks like melter might be slightly more efficient or equal. I've always wanted to try some melter guns out. Well, guess what? I don't need to go around and like mess around like magnetizing. I just take the arms off, and I just put the put the metal gun arms on. Boom, done. People can do it with magnetization, but Games Workshop needs to make it even more convenient. And that is how you can solve that. It's not just digital rules. You have to have the combination of both. Games Workshop need to make the models as modular as possible and combine that with digital rule set, and then you're fine. And they've already done this in so many areas. You know, Lehman Russ to Marshall turrets. You can take all the different options out there, but why do I have to have two different kits? No, one Lehman Russ kit with every option in it. Every single option done. The sponsors you can already swap out. Great. You know what? The sponsors themselves, I shouldn't have to glue them on or mess around magnetizing them. Sometimes I want sponsors, sometimes I won't. I need those to be modular. And that's how Games Workshop needs to do it. They need to take the modularness to the next level, combine that with the digital rules, and then release everything at once. And that way, if people, as they're tweaking things, it doesn't matter via the new digital rule set, it doesn't matter because people have got every option they need, and it's easy for them to swap bits out. And that's the way you do it. Anyway, that's my ideas around this. See, it wasn't just a rant video about you know bloat and all that kind of stuff. I offered in a positive side as well, which is what I always try and do. I don't want to become like just a salty content producer, because once you go down that route, it's the dark side. It's very tempting, but you've got to avoid it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider, heading on over to the Patreon page. It's thanks to the Patrons that this channel is able to be just still around. I'm not even exaggerating that. It's thanks to Patrons that I'm able to explore the game systems. I'm able to, get other armies like my Black Templars, so I can, learn about these insights and all this kind of stuff. And it's thanks to the Patrons that I'm able to go to tournaments and bring you guys back genuine frontline information about the competitive meta, and not just repeat stuff that you see online. So if you like that, consider heading on over to the Patreon page, the link down in the description below. And like I said, massive thank you to the current Patreon supporters. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.